I thought I've heard everything get labeled as racist, but this might be a brand new one. How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brian Logan, and today we got to talk about a young lady on TikTok making the case that there is racism in the environment and also infrastructure. Now, this is really a ridiculous video, but before I even get into it, I just want to say this. I feel like the Chinese have exported TikTok to us to brainwash our youth. First, it was just dances, right? Hey, mommy, daddy, I'm going to get on TikTok. I'm going to do this dance with 18 choreographed steps in 25 seconds and show all my friends and all this and that and the third. But now they have their account. So they're going on there scrolling and they're getting inundated with propaganda from China that's pro-China. A lot of stuff about the U.S. that's not true. A lot of race-based propaganda. They even have MS-13 DNC on there spewing out propaganda. So now I have to come and clean up the propaganda. I have to deprogram people that may even believe some of the nonsense that's on there. And before I even go down that particular rabbit hole, let's roll the clip. In this clip, you see the young lady making her case. After we get done watching that, I'll come back. I'll talk about what she said there. Then I'll give you my 2 cents, my deep detailed analysis, and then I'll wrap it on up with a nice bow on top. So without further ado, let's go ahead and roll it.
There is absolutely no reason why Hurricane Ida should have done that much damage to Louisiana and Mississippi and along the path that it's going to take. And part of the reason why is because there is infrastructural and environmental racism in a lot of minority and low socioeconomic communities. There's no reason that the southern border of Louisiana should still be struggling to figure out what type of infrastructure and technology they can use to prevent minority communities from being destroyed. And on top of that, not just being destroyed, but also having to put in their own resources to rebuild their own community. Like, wake up and smell the flowers, people, okay? There is race embedded into every decision in the United States of America, and the sooner that we realize that, the sooner we can stop people from dying because of things that could have been prevented.
I'm not really sure where to begin. First things first, natural disasters are not racist. I'll say that one more time for people in the back, in case you didn't hear me. Natural disasters are not racist. You have all kinds of things that can happen. You can have a hurricane, or tornado, an earthquake, wildfire. These things happen all over the world, not just the US of A, and not just in low-income areas. I'm from Virginia, so, I grew up right there on the beach, Virginia Beach, that area. So every year, and you guys who are in the hurricane-prone area or have lived in the hurricane-prone area, you already know what it is. From the summertime, like early summer on up until Halloween, you're worried about a hurricane coming. You see it on the news. Off the coast of Africa, you got some tropical depression, and then it starts to gain intensity, and you see it coming to the U.S. It's like, okay, is it going to be a Cat 1, Cat 2? Might get a Cat 5. Is it going to make direct landfall? Is it going to go to the north, to the south? Is it going to go to UK, Canada? Where is it going to go? New York? What's going to happen? If you're living in the Gulf Coast, it's the same thing. Sometimes even on the West Coast, you might have a cyclone or a typhoon, whatever it is over there. You might even have that hit you over there. Now, the main thing about a hurricane is not necessarily the wind. The wind is a problem, especially if you got a Cat 5. But the most damaging thing from a hurricane is usually the rain. It's the rain. And if you're living in a place like, New Orleans, where you're below sea level, which is pretty much a bowl, your biggest concern is the storm surge, bringing in all that water and the flooding. That was the issue in Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina was not a devastating storm as far as the wind. Not really. That wasn't really the problem. The problem was the storm surge afterward and the levees breaking. She's speaking about technology not really being there to prevent these things from happening. Yes, it is. Okay, there's a system that exists in a lot of these low-lying areas, levee systems, water pumping, to prevent the city from constantly being underwater. if you're below sea level and surrounded by water on the Gulf of Mexico, a simple rainstorm can flood the entire city. But see, when you have a hurricane that hits, especially a high intensity hurricane, sometimes these things can fail. And everybody that lives there knows this. They know where they live at. They know to live in the hurricane prone area the same way I did. Living in the hurricane prone area, you know where it floods, because even during regular rainstorms, it's going to flood in certain spots. Just like, being in Norfolk, it was certain areas that will always flood. Spartan Village, if you know, you know. Spartan Village, it could be a spring shower, a light spring shower, and it'll flood out there. You know exactly where it's going to flood, how it's going to flood, what's going to happen. So if you live there, you take that risk. That's just part of life. It's not about racism. It's not about, these black and brown areas, these low income areas. It's not even about that, because if you're living on the left coast, for example, we know it's a fault line right there. LA gets hit by earthquakes all the time. San Fran, Bay Area, they're right on the fault line as well. They had a really damaging earthquake back in the early 1900s. And that particular area is one of the most wealthy in the whole world. Right there, San Fran, Bay Area. San Francisco, Palo Alto, I guess it's right there. San Jose, Oakland. An earthquake can hit and devastate it. And you're right there on the water. So you can have earthquakes, flooding, a little bit of everything. I mean, is it racism if an earthquake hits and all the buildings just suffer severe damage? These $1 million homes on the low end, $1 million, multi-million-dollar houses? Or how about people like LeBron James living in a 20-something $1 million estate who had to evacuate when the wildfires hit? You're living in California, left coast. It's a really dry area, so wildfires are going to happen and they're going to spread. You know that risk by living over there. Everybody knows it. It is what it is. So why act like when a natural disaster hits, it's a surprise, number one, and number two, that it's somehow racism and it's an economic thing? No, it's not, because everyone gets hit by it. Okay. Where I was living last year, we got hit by a tornado in our neighborhood. Now, luckily, me and my wife got out of there and it was all right. But it didn't matter what color you are. My white neighbors and black neighbors alike got hit the same. Now, luckily, our house didn't get tore apart. We just had like a little branch, rest on our home. But try to get out of there. We didn't have any power and the streets are blocked off and flooded. It was a mess. But is that about racism? Is it about infrastructure racism? Or is it just about, hey, sometimes things happen and you have to be able to prepare for these things, regardless of how much money you make or whatever? There are certain countries that are like right in the path of the hurricane out in the water, like Jamaica, for example. I have a cousin who's like my aunt, basically, because I got an older cousin. You know how it goes. But anyway, so my cousin is from Jamaica, and I was a young man, and I asked the question, hey, you right there in the path of the hurricane, how do you prevent from having the entire country just devastated by the hurricane? She was like, well, when the hurricanes come, we just go to the mountains, go to higher elevation. Because again, the issue with the hurricanes is not necessarily the wind damage, like you would see on TV from Hurricane Andrew back in Florida back in the day. It's not even about the wind necessarily. It's about the flooding. And if you're living in a high up area, you're going to have less of a problem with flooding. If you're living right by a river, right by the water, that storm surge can hit. You might even get hit with a tsunami. And if you're right there at or near sea level, that can be a very damaging thing. But if you go up 1,000 feet or more, it's not really a big deal. Okay. So that's the issue. But you know what? As I close, that young lady, judging by what she was saying, has been brainwashed by critical race theory. Toward the end there, she says race is in every interaction, everything that we do. That is a core tenet of critical race theory. This is why so many of us have been going to the school board meetings, making videos, making the big fuss and or stink about CRT, because you're going to have young ladies like that going to school, Notre Dame or whatever, even before Notre Dame, just going to the regular high school or whatever, they're getting brainwashed like this. So it's no surprise that they think that a natural disaster like a hurricane, tornado, earthquake, or whatever somehow has racism involved. It's not even about that. There's plenty of technology to prevent these kind of things from happening. But at a certain point, if you're living below sea level and you know you're hurricane prone and the hurricane hits, there's going to be damage. It is what it is. You're seeing it right now in New York City with the flooding. You got concrete everywhere. There's not really any kind of catch basins or retention ponds, and the water's got to go somewhere. It's going to flood. The same thing can happen during a regular rainstorm. This is just basic facts. And if you don't want to live in a place like that, we'll try to avoid it. We know how to live in certain places where you're going to be less vulnerable to natural disasters. But if you don't take that opportunity to live there, then you live with risk. That's just life. But I think I'll leave that right there for now. And what say you? Do you think that hurricanes, infrastructure, and the environment have racism embedded in them? Whatever your thoughts on that are, let me know in the comments below. You guys know where I stand. There's no racism in natural disasters. Sometimes things happen. And my heart goes out to everyone affected by the storm, everyone who lost their life. My heart goes out. It's just unfortunate that these things happen. You can't stop it. I mean, what are you going to do? Hurricane comes. All you can really do is maybe just evacuate, like I've done a couple of times when hurricane hit back when I was in Virginia. Just kind of, just try to bear it out, tough your way through it. What can you do? Living in a disaster-prone area, you can leave or just deal with the risk. If you live through the risk and something bad happens, the outcome is not due to racism. But whatever your thoughts are, please let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.